Hello, everyone. I'm Ciaran. Welcome back to Turn Up to 11, where we talk about all things rock and roll.
I'm Josie, and today we're going back to the 1960s when the British bands crossed the Atlantic and absolutely took over the American music scene.
And if you don't know what that's called, it's called the British Invasion.
Alright, picture this. It's the early 60s in Britain. We've got a load of lads in garages and pubs learning Chuck Berry and riffs and copying Elvis.
Yeah, they're playing a lot of American songs. They're influenced by blues, souls, and early rock that we talked about last episode. If you heard that.
But then, something changed. British bands started writing their own tunes. They weren't just copying anymore, they were creating something new.
And leading the charge was the Beatles.
Right. So in 1964, the Beatles went to America and played on the Ed Sullivan Show. And let me tell you, it was madness.
70 million people. That's about the population of Britain back in the day.
And suddenly, every American teen was obsessed with these four lads from Liverpool. The hair, the suits, the accents, and of course, the music.
And then songs like "I Want to Hold Your Hand" and "She Loves You" were topping the US charts. The Beatles, kicked the door wide open. And now we're going to play a song by the Beatles called "I Want to Hold Your Hand."
Oh yeah, I'll tell you something. I think you'll.
And once the Beatles made it big, the floodgates opened. British bands were everywhere.
Yeah, we're talking about the Rolling Stones, the Kinks, the Who, the Animals, the Hollies, and Gary and the Pacemakers.
Each band had their own sound. The Beatles were poppy and clever, the Stones were gritty and bluesy, and the Who were loud and wild. And then the Kinks.
You Really Got Me is by the Kinks. That's one of their first songs. It was proper distorted guitar, it was raw, and it was messy. And we're going to play that song right now.
So why did American teens go so mad for British bands?
There's a few reasons. First, the music was just really good and catchy. And it was different, but it still had that fresh rock and roll energy though, but with a new twist.
Second, it was the look. These British bands had a certain style. The mop haircuts, the skinny suits, compared to the older American acts, they were just cooler.
And I think a third thing, it was timing. I think people didn't know what they wanted until they had it, and then that British band brought the spark. And we're going to play "Give Me Shelter" by the Rolling Stones.
The British invasion wasn't just about songs though. It changed fashion, youth culture, and even how bands behaved.
Right, suddenly it was cool to be in a band, to write your own music. It wasn't just about rock and roll. It just wasn't an entertainment thing. It was an expression.
British bands didn't just perform, they challenged stuff. The Who smashed their gear on stage. The Stones sang about things that weren't exactly polite. It pushed boundaries.
And the British band started inspiring Americans too. Lots of US groups took the idea from British acts and started evolving into their own music. That's the back and forth that made rock and roll better for both sides of the Atlantic. And now we're going to play "House of the Rising Sun" by the Animals.
There is a house in New Orleans. They call the rising sun.
What did the British invasion leave behind?
Basically, it showed rock and roll didn't belong to just one country. It was global, it was youth-driven, and it could keep up evolving.
It also proved bands could write their own songs, use the studio like an instrument, and make their albums mean something.
Without the British invasion, we probably wouldn't have a lot of the bands we have today, and genres like punk, glam, and maybe even indie. Even the big US rock acts of the 70s and 80s that we might talk about a bit later.
It was a moment in history where British music didn't just succeed, it dominated, and honestly, we're still feeling it today. So after the British invasion completely shook up the 60s, rock didn't fade away, it exploded in the 1970s.
Yeah, in the 70s, rock and roll grew up, it got louder, it got bolder, even more personality, the sound got bigger, but so did the impact on people's lives.
The world was shifting fast. The 60s had been all about rebellion and change protests, peace, love, and loud guitars. But by the 70s, people were
Yeah,
figuring out what came next.
yeah. Quite famously, the Beatles broke up. The war ended, the Vietnam War, and there was a sense of what to do for young people. Rock became that kind of outlet and where they could still feel free, creative, and understood.
One of the coolest things about the 70s was how personal rock music became. It wasn't just something you listened to, it was something you were.
Exactly. The music you loved said everything about you, how you dressed, who you hung out with, what you believe in. It was like wearing your personal outfit out loud.
If you liked the heavier rock, you were all about leather jackets, denim, and attitude. If you were into folk or softer rock, you leaned towards earthy vibes, flares, bandanas, peace signs. It wasn't just a look, it was a lifestyle.
And that identity gave people a sense of belonging, even if you felt out of place at school or work. You could find your own people in the record shop or the basement music in your room.
Rock fans built little communities, sharing records, trading mixtapes, hanging out and arguing over which album was the best. It wasn't just about music, it was about the connection.
We're going to play a song by Fleetwood Mac called The Chain. You might have heard of it.
Listen to the wind blow, watch the sun rise.
Speaking of connections, nothing brought people better together than rock concerts in the 70s.
Oh yeah, before then, gigs were mostly small bars, clubs, theatres, but now rock had gone stadium-sized. Tens of thousands of people packed into arenas, all singing the same words, all moving to the same beat.
Yeah, and for the fans, that was magic. Imagine seeing like a sea of people with flashing lights, bass shaking in the background, and everyone screaming the same chorus. For a few hours, it didn't matter who you were, it was something bigger.
Yeah, people didn't just watch concerts, they felt them. It was an escape, it was freedom, it was joy.
And that experience stuck with you. People talked about that, their first concert experience, like it was a life-changing moment, because for a lot of them, it really was. And now we're going to play Killer Queen by Queen.
Queen, gunpowder, gelatine, dynamite with a laser beam, guaranteed to blow your mind.
The 70s were kind of stressful for a lot of people. Inflation, politics, the future, left uncertain, rock music became an escape from all that.
Totally. You put on a record for an hour, you were somewhere else, and you kind of escaped. Maybe you were on a road trip, or in space, or you just lost in the music.
Rock let people dream bigger. That's what made it powerful.
And it was and it wasn't just about the fantasy either. Even songs that were serious or helped people imagine a better life, or at least understood in the one they had.
That's what's wild is how much rock became part of everyday life. You'd hear it blasting from cars, in stores, at parties. It was everywhere.
And we're going to play Another Brick in the Wall by Pink Floyd.
We don't need no
I hope you enjoyed that song. Yeah, record stores were the heart of youth culture. People spent flipping around for hours just through albums, arguing about which band was best or which new sound they liked the best. It wasn't just shopping, it was a ritual.
And those records meant something. You didn't just buy them, you studied the covers, memorized the lyrics, and played them until the grooves wore out.
Exactly, and people always pass around mixtapes. Probably a lot of young people now don't know what that is, but you would give your best friend and they would listen for hours.
At its core, though, rock in the 70s was still rebellious. It kept that spark alive from the 60s, that the idea you didn't have to do things the way society told you to.
Yeah, even just turning up the volume, and maybe in your parents' house, was like a small act of rebellion.
That attitude gave people courage. It helped them question things, authority, tradition, and even themselves.
And that's where the real power came from rock and roll. It just made people feel free to be weird, creative, emotional, passionate, free to be themselves. And now we're going to play my personal favourite song. It's called Dire Straits by... Salt and Swings by Dire Straits.
Dark, it's raining in the park, but meantime, sound of the river, you stop and you hold everything.
So when people talk about the 70s, make sure they mention the big names. Zeppelin, Queen, Fleetwood Mac, Pink Floyd, but the real story isn't just about the bands, it's about the people who listened.
Exactly. Rock gave a generation of people to something to believe in, brought them together, gave them confidence, and helped them find their voice.
And that's why the spirit of the 70s still lives on. The songs might be old, but the feeling, that rush of freedom and connection never goes away.
Rock and roll in the 70s wasn't just a soundtrack, it was an identity, community, rebellion, and hope rolled all into one.
And honestly, that's the reason we still turn it up today, because sometimes you just need something to feel that spark again. Remember that music that can still set you free.
Well, that's all from us today. We better wrap up. Our social media is Turn It Up to 11. Well, at Turn It Up to Media on Instagram. There'll be a wee graphic somewhere. My name's been Ciaran. You've been Josie. Next time we're talking about in the 90s to the 2000s.